Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to our webinar on the Earth Charter in Ecological Civilization. I'm Mirian Vilela. I'm the Executive Director of the Earth Charter International, which has an education center that is located here in Costa Rica on the campus of the University for Peace. I welcome all of you who are joining us today through various different channels. This is a webinar that is being live streamed through Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, Tencent Meeting, and Baidu, which is one of the largest platforms in China for this kind of things. And we are very happy with this. We framed today's event with the theme Harmony, Ecological Civilization as Communities of Communities. This is actually the fourth webinar of this kind, the fourth and the last one of a series of webinars that started in September as a collaborative effort between several organizations. The Earth Charter International, the University for Peace, the Institute of Ecological Civilization, the Center for Process Studies, PACE Institute, China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation. And we are very happy with the good content that was generated through the rich exchange of ideas in each of these webinars. And I'm sure today is also going to be a great webinar with a rich exchange of ideas. Now, let me introduce our guest speakers of today. I'm very grateful and honored to have each one of you here. First is Klaus Bosselmann, who is Professor of Environmental Law and Founding Director of the New Zealand Centre for Environmental Law at the University of Auckland. Thank you, Klaus, for joining us all the way from New Zealand. Tian is Professor at the School of Humanities and Social Sciences in the Southern University of Science and Technology in China. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Then Dr. Jinfeng Zhou, who is Secretary General of China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development, which is one of our partner organizations. Thank you for the three of you for joining us today. Once we conclude with our guest speakers, we are going to invite Ellie, who is here with us. She's project director of the Institute for Ecological Civilization, and also Dr. Huang, who is also joining us today, who is the president of PACE Institute and professor at Renmin University of China. So our purpose with these webinars and discussions, this effort that brought together so many different organizations, is to generate a dialogue. A dialogue about ecological civilization. We want to explore the meaning of ecological civilization and hear your thoughts on this. We also want to see whether the Earth Charter can be considered as a guide in the path towards ecological civilization, given the fact that the Earth Charter offers a unique, comprehensive vision of the values and principles that are most needed if we are to take the path towards a more just, sustainable, and peaceful world. So, and we are organizing these discussions and webinars as part of our UNESCO Chair on Education for Sustainable Development with the Earth Charter, which has the purpose to generate educational programs, courses, and research activities on sustainability, values, and education. So let me start with the first question. And I'm going to ask Klaus Bosselmann to start answering. And the question is, what is ecological civilization for you? And what are the key differences between the current civilization and ecological civilization? So, Klaus.
Yes, thank you, Miriam. And thank you, of course, for organizing this wonderful series. I learned a lot about the concept of ecological civilization over the years, but it was highlighted over the last few months, tuning in here and there. The question is what it is for me. For me, it's not necessarily what it means for others or what it means for the government of China. So I'm starting really with my own research and my own values. And that is to say that ecological civilization is based on the wisdom that humans are part of nature. And everything that we as humans do will have an effect on us, what we do to each other and what we do to the natural environment. So in essence, an ecological civilization would respect and care for all forms of life, not because animals and plants and ecosystems are useful for humans and their communities, but because of the intrinsic value of nature. So it's fundamental to observe the biocentric or ecocentric focus of this idea. In this sense, I'm afraid, we are seeing at the moment around the world only pockets of what I then would call an emerging ecological civilization. I live in New Zealand, and this is probably not by chance that we in New Zealand are the first country that recognize the intrinsic value of nature, in a sense that a number of ecosystems, including rivers and mountains, have been declared legal persons by law, by implication, acknowledging the intrinsic value of nature here. And this, of course, is due to our indigenous tradition. It is not the Western world that is somehow smarter here in New Zealand. It's entirely the legacy and the wisdom of the indigenous Maori people that would allow us to learn from them. So number one, for me, this would be the vision of an ecological civilization, that we have a clear ethical focus based on a non-anthropocentric ethic. And then your second part of the question refers to the difference between the current form of civilization and the vision of a new ecological civilization. Well, by implication, I would say the difference is striking. What we are having today is a form of civilization which has emerged over centuries and millennia that is oblivious to ecological wisdom in that sense. And I would also critically say that the term ecological civilization, which was of course emerging in the 1990s, early 2000s, first in China, but I might add first in Russia. My first encounter with ecological civilization in the German language, Ecologische Zivilisation, was with a meeting I had with the then Deputy Minister for Ecology and Natural Resources of the Soviet Union, Professor Oleg Kolbasov, who coined, along with other Russian experts, this notion of ecological salvation. This is based on Marxism, and Marxism is anthropocentric. And I would challenge also, the current idea that is emerging in China as being a mix between the wisdom of ancient cultures and philosophies, in particular Taoism in China, and I would celebrate the non-anthropocentric tradition there that has, of course, been tried by the government in China, but somehow married with the rather traditional Marxist idea of calling environmental protection ecology. So I keep my judgment open in terms of what we are seeing now, developing in particular in China, where it's been written into the constitution, whether we can meaningfully talk about the emergence of an ecological civilization. So this would be my reply to your question.
Thank you, Klaus. Professor Song Tian? Please, would you open your mic?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you for the invitation. And I think it's a good chance for the scholars to exchange our idea about ecological civilization. Maybe as Klaus just mentioned, the ecological civilization seems a political term in China. But for me, it's not only political, and it's academic. For me, it's an academic term, and for me, and it's a concept comparing with industrial civilization. So because of the industrial civilization can't be sustainable. So we have to find a new way of life for every person and also for all human beings. So that's for me, that is the beginning of I'm thinking about the concept of ecological civilization. So for me, and I wrote some papers about this. So I would like to try to briefly the the key point of my paper here. So many people in China and maybe also in other countries, they believe the ecological civilization or the sustainable society is the is another kind of industrial civilization. Is the most advanced stage of industrial civilization, and they trust in science and technology, and they believe if we exchange the energy by the current energy by the so-called clean energy, we change the technology by the so-called low carbon technology, and we exchange the economic model by uh, uh, the recycling economy, and we can keep the main structure of the industrial civilization. We can still have the high tech and without any environmental effect. But for me, that's impossible. So I think the ecological civilization is a totally new style. Um, so uh, for the key difference, the important difference between the ecological civilization and the current industrial civilization, I think the most important thing is uh, the goal of the society. Why the society is. Nowadays, every society, every country think the GDP is the most important volume. So every country try to produce more and more things, but every part of the production, they change the nature of the forest, the mine, natural water into the different garbage. And this is one way cannot be returned. So we have to change this world. The goal of the society is not GDP, not the capital proliferation. And also for any individuals, any person, we have to change, we have to think about the question, what kind of life is good life? So if so, Leopold said in his book, he said, what is important for some people, seeing the bird fly, seeing the flower blossoming, that is more important than watching TV. So if a society, most people believe seeing bird fly, seeing the flower blossom is more important than watching the TV or cell phone, and maybe we can construct a ecological civilization. If the most people in the society believe this is the most important thing, and that's definitely industrial civilization. So this is the most important thing for me is, and also we have to change. We have a totally change, like the view of nature. Now we view the nature as a machine. So this is the mechanism view of nature, and we have to change it by the non-mechanism view of nature. And also we have to learn living within the only one earth. We have only one earth, but the industrial civilization, the life of this civilization depends on more than one earth. So we have to learn how to living within the one earth. So and also I think the ecological civilization have to we should have the diversity, cultural diversity, and the eco diversity. And follow this, we need many the social institutions, the economical systems, the law systems, the role of science and scientific technology in the society, and also education, everything we have to.
To be a new kind of education, probably,
Yes.
right? Because the current education has been articulating a different goal for the society. So thank you for highlighting the importance of looking at different goals. Professor Jinfeng Zhou, what do you think is, in your perspective, what is ecological civilization for you?
Thank you. Eco-civilization is not something belong to China. More than 2 years ago, I wrote to the Convention of Biological Diversity and proposed to use eco-civilization as the theme of COP15, and they eventually accept my suggestion. Why? Because I believe all the human beings must accept eco-civilization, must change their way of life. And I'm also member of executive committee of Club of Rome. Many members in Club of Rome discussing about new civilization. We believe we need total change to face, to tackle the recent emergency, climate emergency, biodiversity emergency, and the public health emergency. The only way we can handle all this is we need to start a new civilization. So that is, we are getting more and more people agree about that. But what is the name for the new civilization? We think there is the only choice is eco-civilization, because biodiversity is the core, is the major threat, is the major crisis we are facing today. And as you may know, the planet are starting the 6th massive extinction, which is, although we have the CBD, although we have the millennium goal, but we have not achieved any significant progress on stopping, slow down of the massive extinction, which is the reason we must start a new civilization. This is the major point is of this civilization is save our habitats. And to save our habitats, biodiversity is the common sense, is the convention we all major over 190 countries accept. That is the core part of, so we must start in change of everything, almost everything. As we all understand, the human experience the primitive civilization and agricultural civilization, industry civilization. Now today, we must stop the growth of industrial civilization. We must start the eco-civilization. This is the major part and the major difference. And we not only need to have the convention, we not only need, all governments has regulations, laws regarding these issues. We must change, all of us must change, including the culture, the education, behavior, and that is only we can change our life, future through the eco-civilization. And we should not grow our economy as we did in the industrial civilization. We do not have enough eco resources to support such a big population to live on the planet. We must change our way of life. That is, we must get into eco-civilization. We must change everything of today. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So what are the 3 most important values that underlie, or that could underlie, the vision of ecological civilization? What are the values that can be drivers for society to move towards the path of ecological civilization? Professor Song Tian?
Hi. I think I just mentioned about the difference between the two civilizations, and I think if we let me give the three most important values, I think the first is the goal of the society, the aim of a person. We have to change about this. That is to think about what life is good life. This is the first, the most important. So if we cannot change this mind, and we cannot, if we change the mind, and the other things will follow. And if we keep on uh, the the basic idea of the industrial civilization, and we cannot move toward to the ecological civilization. And the second, I think, is the view of nature. We view the nature as a machine or as a community of life, as the title, communities. So that's the second one. And the third one is, I think it followed the 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 second, uh, the diversities, not the single, the monopoly. So we need the diversity cultures, and only the diversity of cultures can keep the diversities of ecology. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So worldviews, mind, but how to change the mind, and having rethinking, an invitation for us to think about the goal of our societies and civilization. That's very good. Thank you. Dr. Zhou, what are the
Yes,
three most important values that underlie the vision of ecological civilization
in
from your
fact,
perspective?
I have, thank you. In fact, we think there is only one core value, that is the biodiversity. Within this one core value, we have several major ideas. First is natural. We must respect the natural. And the Earth experienced the 4.5 billions of years. So the nature human has not enough knowledge to handle, to change, and make significant, or to make another one. So we have to respect the nature. For example, in Beijing, they are building a modern park. They call it the forest and the wetland park. But we make a survey. We find out what we have built. The park compared with the wilderness at the same place is much worse. And the wilderness has over 40 species of birds this month, but the new modern park only has 4 species of birds. So people can only build the world according to their industrialized civilizations value, view, idea, and the sense, which is not good enough. And the nature, we must respect the nature. That's the number one under the biodiversity. Second, we under the biodiversity, we think is we need to care more about our habitats. Yes, we should care about our own place, home, but today our habitats of the 7.5 billion people are in danger. We must value that in front of our, we want to enjoy with more energy, more natural resources. We must put it aside for a while. We need to the second most important value is our habitats of human beings. And the third, we think, is the most important is the change of all our way of production and the way of lives. And we need to shift from the GDP to GEP, gross ecological system production. And only through these major value chains we can survive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for emphasizing and stressing the importance of respecting for nature and biodiversity, and of course the diversity of cultures as part of the values on that. Klaus, would you share with us what do you think are the three most important values that could be drivers or underlie ecological civilization? And maybe if you can add, if their charter can be used as a reference or as a guide for that.
Yes, thank you. I share those observations that have been made with concerning respect for nature, but I like to take a slightly more legal angle to it, because I believe in the concept of ecological civilization as an emerging concept, as a possibility, and it's important to me that I can derive it from existing consensus that we might already have. And if I refer to international environmental law, there are a few very important developments that I want to highlight. So my three values, as you are asking them for, I would rephrase to be three foundational principles. Number one to me is what I call strong sustainability. This is the result of an effort during the 1980s, the Brundtland Report and so forth. Much misinterpretation went on the part of states and vested interest, but the essence really of sustainable development, if we're serious, is strong sustainability, sustainable development, meaning the ecological system defines the parameters under which human development is conceivable and possible. So ecology first, a subset social systems, and subset of that economic system. This is very important to repeat, repeating this for, trying to repeat it for many, many decades now, because I feel that there was a deliberate attempt at in the early 1990s on the part of powerful Western countries, but also others, to debunk the basic philosophy of sustainability. So ecology, to me, you know, we're talking about ecological civilization, has the emphasis on framing our policies and our designs of societies under the parameters of what ecological systems require. There cannot be any compromise between ecology and economy. So that's my one foundational principle, strong sustainability. And second, the importance of ethics and science, but again in the context of what has been said in international agreements. Often overlooked, for example, Principle 7 of the Rio Declaration of 1992 refers to a fundamental duty of states to cooperate in order to preserve Earth, the integrity of Earth ecological system. So there you have it, repeated in 26 international agreements, most of them soft law, but the Paris Agreement in its preamble also repeating the duty of states to cooperate in order to protect the integrity of ecological of Earth ecological systems, plural or singular. What it means to me is this is where our thinking has to start. So number two is really the validity and arguably the fundamental validity of the concept of protecting the integrity of the Earth ecological system. And I can't possibly envisage any compromise there. So number three is the role of law and governance in that setting. I believe there is a need for fundamentally rethinking our legal approaches, our legal concepts, matching, you know, the requirement of a non-anthropocentric ethics. And of course, there are many attempts being done. They all come from civil society or from the wisdom of indigenous cultures, never from governments. And this is to insist that we have an ecocentric modeling, or I call it ecological law modeling, in place. And this is a process that has yet to fully unfold. And related to this is also the idea of a governance, the role of a state, a government. After all, we trust our governments. We as citizens put trust into our governments, and we expect from them to have our best in mind, naturally, but also be aware of the fundamental importance to preserve the integrity of the Earth system. And therefore, Earth trusteeship is an inherent part of this whole concept of moving towards an ecological civilization. You notice all of these three elements or foundational principles are a reflection of what I think ecology is about. Ecology, I can only perceive as a system of interconnectedness, including humans. And if we have an agreement on this, then a number of things follow, as opposed to a rather shallow understanding of ecology, where somehow we assume that nature operates in ecological interconnectedness, but somehow us not, the humans. This would be a fundamental mistake to be made. And briefly, with reference to the Earth Charter, I still celebrate the Earth Charter as the single document that has spelled out the various applications of this kind of wisdom or of these fundamental principles. And it was a long effort preceding the adoption of the Earth Charter, and ever since we are trying to communicate this. The Earth Charter has it all. It talks about the central importance of respect for all forms of life, or celebrating our membership, our belonging to the community of life, to Earth community. So this is non-anthropocentric language. The model of ecological integrity as a central parameter or goal, as has been said here, the goal of a good life, right? This has to be translated into the aspiration to provide for the protection of the integrity of ecological system. The Earth Charter says it and puts, you know, these kind of fundamental requirements into the context of democracy, economic equality, and human rights, and so forth. So there's a very clear message from my perspective, really, to fully explore the wisdom behind the Earth Charter. You can say a lot about, you know, whether the wording was right, whether we would rephrase it if we would write the Earth Charter today, 20 years later, or whether we should be far more ambitious in terms of criticizing governments, states, the global capitalist model in terms of what has gone wrong. There's of course a lot to be said about the deterioration of democracies in certain countries and how the split of societies has occurred. We are probably even further away from an ecological civilization than we were 20 years ago. But again, the reminder would be, I think that's important for us to remind ourselves what we as an international community have achieved some 20, 25 years ago, before neoliberalism sort of took us into another direction, if you will. So clearly the Earth Charter, I think, has all the ingredients in it, as expressed also partially in current international agreements. The problem is they are overlooked. They are purposely overlooked and neglected by governments.
So it could be used as a reference or as a guide to help us move towards the direction of ecological civilization.
Yes.
Okay, I would like to start now asking the third question to Jinfeng Zhou. What do you think are the main roadblocks that prevent humanity to move towards ecological civilization?
Thank you. Number one is the industrial civilization, which includes the law system, include the technology, include the industry, economy, including the everything almost. And today, that have a big force to keep going, and that's the number one. The second, I think, is they have, based on capital and money, a complete framework and a mechanism to drive marketing, selling, production, in the massive production that make a big, huge cost of the environment, and including like the pesticides. They are making their markets. They are trying to promote that make a big damage to the environment. They're a complete, for example, in China, they are trying to build roads, to build new parks, to build. the nature all those changes of to make it more. So I think the number two is the money and the system, the mechanism of business growing. That in China we have a Double 11, that is November on sale market day, which promote a huge amount of production selling, but a big portion of it is waste. But based on the industrial mechanism, they get a big way and forward, and they expand a lot. And the third, I think, is the habits, the culture, the tradition that prevent people to get into the new civilization is total change. So it takes time, and it's hard to make sometimes for people to make the change. Thank you.
Thank you. So the third one is cultural change, habits. We have to rethink how we can, and probably they are connected with our mindsets and our worldviews. There could be roadblocks. Thank you. Klaus Bosselmann, would you share with us what do you think are the main roadblocks for us to move towards that path?
Thank you. First of all, I fully embrace what you just said. I mean, this is very similar to what I have to say. I would rephrase it slightly, would say number one, the biggest main roadblock to me is the current power structures that we are surrounded by, exemplified by multinational companies driven by profit and with all the devastating effects it has for societies and for the environment at large, but associated also the compliance of states, particularly certain states, right? And let's face it, United States has let us down deeply, and we are not in a position to see any quick fixes. I wouldn't say by criticizing United States and this kind of obsession with itself and so forth, the problems that the US have, would excuse any other powers, like including China, right? I would have to say similar critical things about China, but not in a sense that I would sort of dismiss them as, people or organizations, states that should not be part of this journey towards an ecological civilization. Far from it. My point is only to become aware of how much of our ideas and our goals and our ambitions as humanity are constantly undermined by current power structures that are not controlled by ethics, by law, and so forth. So the second concern related to this, we need to advocate a rethinking of what the public good is within governments and of governments. At the moment, and I would even include my experience with the New Zealand government here, there's too much emphasis on economic reasoning. This is all about, how much money it costs and so forth. We just need to turn things around rather than economic thinking, which is short-term by definition. We need a far broader framework of thinking, so long-term visions. I would call it ecological thinking, but call it what you will. We just need to be aware and overcome the restrictions of these cost-benefit analysis and economic short-sightedness. And thirdly, the lack of a coherent goal that would unite all states, right? 20 years ago, we would have said, sustainable development, the wonderful formula where all countries in their various backgrounds and various abilities to contribute to the journey towards a sustainable development. We were far more optimistic then, and we have failed. We have seen the undermining of this ambition of ecologically sustainable development by neoliberal economics and so forth. So we need a reminder, almost a covenantal understanding of what we have done in the past, the kind of consensus that was there in the 1980s and early 1990s, and need to rejuvenate this spirit by saying, what do we really mean by sustainable development? I understand the notion of ecological civilization by some is understood as a progression from that, and I would celebrate this. Maybe ecological civilization is far more ambitious than the rather modest idea of sustainable development. I do not know. But what I would envisage is some kind of a consensus building among all states. And maybe my own government in New Zealand, I'm very optimistic there. We have a very great leadership, and we are in good contact with the advocacy of the concept of Earth trusteeship, for example. It takes probably a number of countries to take certain leadership. I wouldn't expect the big countries to take this leadership, but maybe we are at this stage now, especially in the post-pandemic world, where we are capable to formulate a common goal that's relevant for all states, quite beyond the old-fashioned idea of economic growth and so on. So this would be my response.
Thank you. Professor Song Tian?
Hi, and as Klaus mentioned, we have a similar idea, and I agree with Dr. Zhou's the basic idea. So for me, it's similar. The first one is the initial of industrial civilization. So there's many things. So it's like a train, a heavy train, and moving so fast. So now you have to try to stop it, but it's sort of very hard because the huge inertia. And within the inertia, I think many people, we have a view of social progress. People believe that the society is progressing from one to another. And the symbol for the progress is the money, the production, the GDP. So it's a mess. And it's like social Darwinism. So if you pursue the progress, and you will, our slogan is the development and sustainable development. But for me, the true question, the real question is not how to develop, but how to stop. We have to stop. And the true question is not the sustainable development, but sustainable survival. The survival is the problem, not the development. So I think this is the first one, the huge inertia of the industrial civilization, including the mind, the people's mind, and also the social structure, the law structure, everything. So the second, I think it's the humans greedy. We are greedy and we are lazy. We want to live more comfortable. We want to have more and more things. So because we have the greedy, so the capital has the power. The capitalism produces more things for us. They feed the greedy for us. And this is a part of the structure of the industrial civilization. And the third one is, I think people, the lack of knowledge about the dead end of the industrial civilization. I think most people do not know what's the survive, what's the miserable situation of the environment and the ecology. People do not know. They don't care. So the temperature, the average temperature, global temperature raised 2 centimeters. People do not care. They do not know what that means. And also people lack of the knowledge of ecology. They do not know what kind of the interaction with the human and the nature, with the different species of the nature. They do not know the humans small active can make the huge effect for the nature. That is the third part. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to turn our attention to examples. We all look for examples, concrete examples of what is happening in terms of the move towards ecological civilization. So I would like to hear from you if you could share with us any example of specific actions and decisions for instance, from government policies or from an organization, a group, a project that gives a specific example of how we can move towards ecological civilization. So may I ask Jinfeng Zhou to start this one?
Yes, there are so many changes. I would like to share examples from our foundation. The first example is this January, right after the epidemic, we write to the administration and ask them to ban eating wildlife. Within 1 week, the Chinese government issued a wildlife ban. After publishing the ban, we are not satisfied. We wrote to National People's Congress of China again to ask them to issue the second ban. And about 1 month, we have the second ban to end eating wildlife, which is a big change. We are so glad we made it. The second example is about the plastic book cover. In China, every year, about over 1 billion plastic book covers are used in primary school, in high school, in middle school. And then after 1 semester, all of them are waste, go to the trash or go to the ocean, and which is terrible. We wrote to the Ministry of Education of China, and we talked to them. Within about 2 months, they issued a new regulation to stop schools to force students use plastic book covers, which seems, if that regulation can implement right, which will save about 1 billion plastic book covers a year. And that is significant eco-civilization achievements. We did that. And the third example I would like to mention is like this animal, this lovely animal called pangolins. And it is believed to be very important traditional Chinese medicine. We have tried hard over 5 years to stop the eating and using as TCM. This year, we can succeed. And we have the pangolin upgraded to class 1. And we have the pangolin scale out of China Pharmacopoeia, which is great significance. We need to protect the habitats in front of, even we believe, some people believe it's good. It's a traditional Chinese medicine, but we need to take it out of the pharmacopoeia. We succeed this year. And the fourth example I would like to mention is Yangtze River. Yangtze River is the biggest river in China, among one of the biggest in the world. And along the Yangtze River, and all local governments are trying to promote economic growth, called it the Golden Belt, Golden River. But this year, China River protection law, and we're organizing a workshop this month and openly to discuss. We put the Yangtze River protection in front of the development, and which is also a great success in this sector. And although it's very difficult for all those business, for all those local governments, they care about the GDP, they care about the employment rate, they care about so much about the rate of poverty, but now they put the protection, the conservation in front of all those cares, concerns, which is also very important, we believe. And also, this year, we write to National People's Congress to amend the Wildlife Protection Law of China, although it was amended in 2016, which is not far back. Because of the pandemic, we take this lesson. We also take this opportunity to move ecological civilization ahead. And the last example I would like to mention is RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. 15 countries, including China, just signed this partnership last month. Immediately, we set up a platform called RCEP 4C, which is that 4C is civil society, culture, communication, and cooperation. We set up this platform to work together with the civil societies of the 15 countries, as well as the people in the world. We try to not stop the development. We try to do sustainable development. We try to put conservation in front of the partnership. We try to participate. We want to bring all stakeholders in the platform to voice, to let the government, the industry, the economy sectors, let our voice heard. We want eco-civilization. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhou. I heard a lot of actions, decisions, and some of them also involve a change of culture, change of mindset that require a lot of work, probably from an education angle, I guess. Professor Song Tian, would you share with us some examples you would know?
Hi. Dr. Zhou just gave us some the many concrete examples for the movement, and I would like to provide some abstract things to share with us. I think in China, more and more people have the new idea to go into the ecological civilization, and especially the government enhanced the concept. Even we have different understanding between the scholars, different scholars and government, but we have the same term, the ecological civilization. So for me, in China, I think since the year 2000, and we have many cultural movement. I think the first one is the movement of science culture. It's a movement happened in some scholars, and also it's a social movement because the scholars also published articles on the mass media to let to speak to the audience, to the people directly, not only discuss the academic idea within the professors. So the so-called science culture movement is some scholars from the field of philosophy of science, history of science. We criticize we question the role of science and technology in the society, and we revalue the value of science and technology. So this is the movement of science culture. And the following is the movement of new natural history. Or in Chinese, we call it Bowu. It's we gave it an English name, Bowology. That means to go inside the nature, to see the nature, to have emotional relationship with a tree, with a flower, with a bird, not is abstract abstract concept of nature, not to love abstract nature, but to love the specified things in the nature. So this is the movement of natural history in China.
So it's called movement of natural history.
Yeah, we call it the new the movement of new natural history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is the first one, and second is the practice of ecological agriculture. Ecological agriculture. I think the ecological agriculture is the basic, the foundation and precondition of ecological civilization.
Mm.
Because everybody have to eat, and so if we cannot produce our food ecologically, we cannot establish the civilization ecological. So I think the ecological agriculture is the precondition and the foundation of ecological civilization. And in China, since the year 20s, and more scholars and the NGO people, they try to start the new way of agriculture. And after almost 20 years, we have there is, I don't know the exact numbers, but maybe thousands of eco farms in China. So this is a big part of movement.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, the third one, I would like to mention the zero waste movement. The zero waste movement, it starts from United States, from like maybe in California, but in China, and some NGO, some what's that, the avant-garde. So they start the zero movement in China, and they do some things at the beginning, focus on the garbage recycling, and then so at the beginning is a focus on the technological perspective, but then move the idea to the social management, and then we will move to the new style, because the technology and the social management currently all in the structure of industrial civilization. And so this movement also move their view to the transformation of civilization. Yeah. So this is my answer. Thank you.
We can hear there are a lot of actions or specific examples from ecological agriculture. Thank you, zero waste, and others. Klaus, do you have any examples you would like to share on specific actions or decisions towards ecological civilization?
And they are all inspired by the Earth Charter. As you know, my work has been around, how to make the Earth Charter relevant in the area of law, politics, and governance. So it's essential for me, and maybe this might be of interest to colleagues, professors, and teachers. Here in New Zealand, we have a network of academics and teachers advocating and teaching global citizenship and ecological citizenship, simply making fellow New Zealanders, young New Zealanders, aware of the limitations that we carry on if we believe we are New Zealanders. By definition, we are not Australians, we are not Americans, not Chinese, and so forth. What a nonsense. Ultimately, we are human beings, and the notion of ecological citizenship does two things. It emphasizes our belongingness to the community of Earth. This is the Earth Charter approach. And equally, of course, it makes an ethical commitment. If we call ourselves ecological citizens or ecological citizenship, then our commitment is to the continuation of life and not a continuation of, let's call it human civilization per se. I can only ever envisage a human civilization in the context of the flourishing of life on Earth. So this is a movement almost here in New Zealand to talk about global citizenship and ecological citizenship at every possible occasion. The second example is to do with what I call eco-constitutionalism. Here in New Zealand, as you know, we are the first country that recognizes rights of nature in various respects, and we find this as indicative for something that's going on in other countries. For example, in many local communities of the United States, you have really good example of committed citizens that change their local statutes to acknowledge the fundamental value of the intrinsic value of the environment or the rights of nature. In Germany, we are currently preparing a referendum on changing the constitution in the year 2022. That's the current thinking. We had a number of conferences recently preparing for such a people's referendum, calling for such fundamental constitutional changes. So that's another second example, right? Eco-constitutionalism. I would envisage the same happening in countries like China and others to take off. And finally, along the lines of specifically making the Earth Charter relevant to our predicaments of today, in 2018, we adopted the Hague Principles for a Universal Declaration of Responsibilities for Human Rights and Earth Trusteeship. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it is something hugely ambitious and at the same time to be celebrated. Some 100 environmental organizations, human rights organizations came together in the Peace Palace in The Hague to revisit the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and basically say, we are now at the stage in the development of human existence where we need to be far clearer about our responsibilities rather than always be focused on human rights. So we are defining in the Hague Principles our belonging to the Earth community, the belonging of each person on this planet to the belonging to the community of life as the parameter under which we can celebrate human rights, but equally human responsibilities and trusteeship responsibilities for the Earth at large. So this in itself was a major step forward. We are currently preparing for the next Earth Summit in 2022 in Stockholm. This is called Stockholm Plus 50 to celebrate 50 years of states trying to come to grips with a common commitment to a more sustainable planet. And at the focus will be two things. One will be the Earth system approach. We haven't talked about this today, so I just mention it here. Of course, based on solid science, Earth system science and planet boundaries modeling. And there's a great network called the Common Home of Humanity, which is based in Portugal. And you will hear a lot more from us. I'm confident about that. We are actually currently preparing for a People's Summit, Stockholm Plus 49, in June, July next year. So hopefully you hear more about it. All in an effort, and from my perspective, to make the Earth Charter, the name says it, Earth Charter, relevant to the current developments that we are seeing. We have the Global Pact for the Environment, right, that you would have heard about, but that a lot of work needs to be done there. We have ideas about the Sustainable Development Goals. A lot of work needs to be done there. I would really be confident enough to say that the Earth Charter philosophy and basically what we are standing for is taking hold. And it has never been a better time than now, I feel. The pandemic and post-pandemic situation, it calls for a breakthrough to something that the world has never seen before. So I'm not optimistic enough to, to celebrate the ecological civilization yet. Who knows? But I've certainly welcomed the opportunity that we were able to share our ideas here. Miriam, thank you very much.
Thank you, Klaus.
Thank you, Klaus.
It seems that just using words, concepts, can enlighten our minds a vision. So when I hear you talk about Earth community, community of life, And the more we talk, we understand, we dialogue about this, I think it can be also instruments to help us move towards, because moving our current civilization towards ecological civilization requires a major change in our worldview, that needs to be worked on from different angles, I would say. But it was very helpful to hear you repeat a number of times, community of life, which I think it's something that helps us just to see the world through different lenses. Now, so thank you to our guest speakers. I'm going to start inviting questions from the audience, and I would like to first start inviting Ellie, who is here with us, who is projects director of the Institute for Ecological Civilization, to offer a reflection, a comment about what was just shared.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. And this has been a fascinating space to kind of reflect on where we are and where we could be and kind of what the process is to get there. I think our opportunity is incredible right now. And that's something that's really positive to me, to hear all of the solutions that are being discussed and the sort of frameworks that are in place and coming up in different spaces. So I have a couple of key themes that I've identified from the conversation that I'd just like to pull out. So frameworks and laws surrounding an ecological civilization that need to be created in a very intentional manner. And there must be parameters to ensure that they're adhered to at different levels and across different sectors. There's a bottom line of sorts, non-compromise between ecology and biodiversity and the economy. The economy must work for ecology and the environment, not the other way around. And this fundamental change is needed through interconnected policies, governance systems, new institutions that are, again, very intentional in their design for protecting the integrity of ecological civilization, as has been mentioned a few times today. To me, the key is the intentional design and this non-compromise, or this bottom line, because business as usual was intentionally designed and has been kept in place intentionally. So we have to be very conscious about the kind of untangling of that and how we stop the current system and recreate this new system. But a big part of that is also understanding how we measure success and what this ideal of an ecological civilization is. Do we use new metrics like gross ecological production? How do we understand what kind of life is a good life? And what we're working towards is designing the metrics that can feed into this transition that should be a just transition. How can we simultaneously stop approaches based in greed, extraction, and exponential growth, and set parameters and frameworks that bring about change that can be applied to and adhered to? There's so much action in different spaces and places and sectors, sometimes interconnected, sometimes not. And to me, a big question that comes up is, what's the kind of threshold for creating an ecological civilization? When can this become a norm? How do we use our networks and our platforms here? There's incredible organizations represented. We have the Earth Charter, we have Ecosystem, we have so many organizations, all doing incredible work, and the actions described here. So how do we bring all of these together to create the momentum to make this the norm, as opposed to the different kind of other? And that's what I'm really excited to see. And I think that perhaps the one good thing about 2020 is that it's shown that options for something different are there. And hopefully we can kind of take the actions described here and the energy and actually create an ecological civilization. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's good to hear you, Ellie. And thank you for highlighting some of the key ideas that we heard also today. May I invite Professor Huang, who's the president of PACE Institute, to offer any reflection or comment of what we just heard. Can you open your mic?
Thank you, Mirian. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for successfully organizing this 4 times. And I said this is 4 webinars on this Ocean Charter and ecological civilization. I think these webinars are very, very successful, organized. All these speakers are very knowledgeable with knowledge, and also have very broad and deep discussion about this Ocean Charter and ecological civilization. Myself didn't get my chance to participate before, but just I watched those videos on YouTube, and I feel myself just also learn a lot. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for these activities. From today's talk, and also this discussion, and also those webinars organized before, I have this. I would like to offer 2 observations, or even not just observations. I would like to have this 2 calls, for this future activities. One thing I feel that we need more dialogue. It's a dialogue between scholars, dialogue between individuals with the different background, income, and culture, different country, and different environment situations. And those individuals live in different places, and people may have different goals of life and values, and they need dialogue. Also, dialogue between these civil organizations and share experience and can work together, and also dialogue between different countries. And I heard a lot people talk about this China working on ecological civilization, but in fact I believe that all countries everywhere working on ecological civilization. But some places may not use this term, but just still the same thing. I would like to also to reflect this dialogue between the scholars. I think it's very, very important, even though this is not an academic workshop, but I found this very, very important after I watched those videos, and also participating in today's webinars. About this concept of ecological civilization. Different people still have different understandings, and also there's not between different people from different countries, but also like scholars even in China, as two distinguished speakers from China. They also mentioned that. You see, this for one definition is kind of broad definition, ecological civilization, in comparing to let's say comparing industrial civilization or agricultural civilization. This agricultural civilization is they move to industrial civilization and now to move this ecological civilization. But this is a broad. This covers everything. But in fact, if people look at this Chinese government to look at those documents, the Chinese government is using kind of a narrow definition of ecological civilization. They put this ecological civilization into like comparing to other activities like political construction and economic construction and cultural construction, social construction, and ecological civilization construction. That's called 5 different activities together. So they still using this ecological civilization terms, still focus on this nature, this environment and energy, natural resources, all this kind of natural stuff. Of course, this ecological civilization connected with all this political, economic, and cultural and social altogether. So, but when government using this design regulation or policies to focus on this narrow definition. I think also it's a global community. We always talk about the sustainable development. Why we need this ecological civilization? I think scholars still need to do some more research and also need a dialogue. I found this Klaus and others also mentioned this. Also, some scholars mentioned in the past webinars. But my understanding is this: let's say sustainable development still focus on development. In full terms, that's called environmental and social sustainable development. We have this strong sustainability, also this weak sustainability, but still focus on this development. Ecological civilization mostly focus on civilization. They pay less emphasis on this economic part, but still economic part is very important. So this part still need a kind of dialogue and discussion between scholars within China, also scholars in the United States and Australia and different continents. So we need to have this one. This is the first one. I think we need to have this first dialogue in the future. Number two. Calls from me today here need to have actions. Need to have actions to improve our knowledge and our behavior of different individuals, households, and communities, and organization forms, and also government. So we need, of course, is education. As Mirian just Untitled International organize all this different education activities, trainings, all this. We need that. Also, we talk about this regulations, informal regulations or formal regulations. Of course, other activities. Lastly, I would hope this Untitled International will organize more activities in the future, and dialogue and promote this kind of activities to improve our knowledge and kind of performance, and also, of course, this awareness of this whole human society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Huang. I understand the importance and the need to organize and promote more exchange and dialogue across areas of knowledge in across cultures. I agree. Let me pull in some questions that we are hearing from those who are joining us today, and I really want to thank all our speakers, everybody who is joining us through the different platforms. We heard one from Anupan Sarab from India that says excellent points by Professor Jinfeng Zhou, that industrial civilization's addiction for technology and market keeps us away from ecological civilization. And the question is our addiction for political solutions rather than being the change we want to see also a roadblock? I guess the question is, are we too focused on political solutions rather than focusing on the change we can be as individuals? Could that be a roadblock? I guess that's a question for Professor Zhou.
Thank you. It's a great question. And we believe the government, all stakeholders' participation is essential. But the core part is people's participation. And all the problems are caused by people, and people can make the final changes. So we have a new term called HBS. Like NBS, we have a term called HBS, human-based solution. We can change the world, and through as a customer, through our purchasing, through our participation of that will make a big change of the business. And also we can public through our voice, we can make the government change. And we as a social civil society in China, this year only, we already participate in almost every week participate in workshop of change of regulation, including local governments, including the national governments, about new law, new regulation. And also, for example, last year, we sued all the fast food delivery platform in China, 6 major fast food delivery platform, including Alibaba, including Baidu. And for what? For the fast food that they delivered have one-time chopsticks. And after our participation, all those leading platforms changed immediately. They offer the option to not what we do not need one-time chopsticks since we eat at the office at home. And 1 year later, starting from Shanghai, all local governments started new law to ban all electronic platform to offer one-time utensils, plastic chopsticks without ask. If the customer asks you, you can provide them. But if they have not asked, you cannot provide them those plastics. That is a very clear change based on people, and we can make the company change, we can make the governments change. So human-based solution is the co-solution. So, and I totally agree with the friend, and yes, we should put more on ourselves. We need change. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question from YouTube we received some time ago already that is on the chat box that says the concept of GEP, or gross ecological or environmental production, is very interesting. Can you please elaborate more on that? So who shared GEP, gross ecological?
Yes.
It was you.
Yes. We already started several 3 examples. For some local cities like Pu'er city, like Xin'anmeng city, and we work for the local government. All those cities are very good at, they have very good environments and forest, river, wetlands. And we calculate the value those wetlands, those forests provide for human as the ecological productivity. And so we want, with a big number calculation, a detailed calculation, and then we promote to the local government, you should not develop those pollution business economy. You should try to put more effort on protect your nature. And other, the central government should reallocate some fund for you to develop the natural protection instead of develop the business. And also for those river, for those major natural conservation area, they should. So this is we have mathematics behind the concept. We already started calculation. And the most important, we propose to the state council, next 5-year plan should take a GDP and GEP, both counts as the guideline, as the goal for local governments. We are underway. If we succeed with this proposal, that will make a fundamental change. That will help local governments start to efforts to pay more attention on the environmental protection and on the ecological systems conservation. And we already started, and there is some way to go, but very hopeful for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Schwartz is here with us. He's the executive director of the Center for Process Studies and also the Institute of Ecological Civilization. He posted a question and maybe a comment in the chat box some time ago. I would like to ask Andrew to come to the floor.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Mirian, and thank you to all of our panelists. This has been yet another great session in this sort of series of 4. And what I was hearing today, and as also reflecting on the other webinars that we've had in this exchange on the Earth Charter and ecological civilization, is a whole lot of sort of agreement on the kinds of values and worldviews and priorities that we have, the kind of direction that we need to go, the world that we need to build. And actually, 3 things specifically were standing out to me and I'm wondering if these 3 things might actually serve as a sort of core that can bring our various networks together, all people interested in the Earth Charter and building an ecological civilization. So those 3 things for me were the interconnection of all things. And I think this also includes the interconnection, of course, of social and environmental challenges. And it seems that that's something that both those who advocate for the Earth Charter and those who advocate for ecological civilization, and of course others not included in those 2 categories, are wanting to affirm the interconnection of all things. The second is the need for what I'll just say is global systems change. So changing not just, individual choices or something like that, but changing the very structures and organization of our social, economic, the way that human communities are organized, right? So changing our systems of production and consumption, our systems of economies, education, political, legal systems, so on. And that those changes, those systemic changes, are guided by alternative values and worldviews, or I think what Klaus has said, ecological ways of thinking and living. And then the third thing that jumped out to me was this clear need for unprecedented collaboration, that we need to be working across areas of specialization, across sectors of society, working across religions, national borders, political affiliations, and that an ecological civilization cannot be built by any one group working by themselves, that it's really going to take all of us to stop the inertia that Sung talked about, that the train that we're on. And I just am curious if you all feel like these 3 fundamental ideas are things that actually we can unite around and that could guide us forward as we work together to build a world that works for all.
Anyone would like to jump just to make a brief comment before we close? Klaus?
Andrew, I fully embrace what you said, right? These 3 areas, I'm fully with you. Can I add a 4th one?
Of course, we can add 4, 5, 6. Yeah. What's your 4th?
Okay, leadership, right? Personal leadership, and so forth, but also valuing true leadership. We are blessed in New Zealand. I never found in my life to celebrate a leader, but we have one called Jacinda Ardern, our Prime Minister. In 3 areas, she's working towards what we might like to call ecological civilization. 1, New Zealand was last year the first country to introduce a general budget for human well-being, and not along the lines of economic growth and GDP. So it was a first little breakthrough, right? The kind of budgeting policies is all about well-being or good life rather than growth, okay? Second example, same government under leadership of Jacinda declaring a climate emergency that just happened last week. And as a consequence, a number of emergency measures are actually being taken. So it's not just a word, emergencies. That's good leadership. You need to not only say something, but act upon it. And she's good at that. And the third example that she's also very good at, we had a conference last night here with the Ministry for Foreign Affairs about the question of the reform of the United Nations system. And we got the Foreign Affairs following it up. There will be a report, and I could, if you're interested, there will be initiative that comes from New Zealand and has to do with reform of the UN system. it has to do with Earth trusteeship, right? Reflecting an idea that comes from the Earth Charter. So sometimes it takes good leaders. I mean, you know, good politicians.
Indeed.
that we
Probably good leaders have vision and courage.
Yeah.
Anyone else would like to comment on Andrew's question? Okay, so I would like to bring just one more thing that I hear. Ron Engel is here with us, and he mentioned about, from his perspective, the integrity of constitutional governance is critical to any progress towards toward an ecological civilization. I just wanted to bring and honor Ron Engel's voice, who has been following these webinars. He is with us. He also asked, I think earlier on in the chat box, he would like to hear anyone else, maybe from our Chinese guest speakers, what do you think is the role of the Earth Charter? If the Earth Charter can help us move the world towards an ecological civilization. Maybe Tian?
Okay, thank you. Let me repeat the question. The Chinese friend they see in the Earth Charter to help move. Okay. I think the maybe two things. The first is the international international cooperation. So we share the different idea internationally, and to promote the international education. It's an I think it's a long way to go. We cannot do it within very quickly to go to the new stage of the civilization. So, I think we have to change the new generation's mind. So from kindergarten, from the primary school, and when they grow up, and the people's mind changed, I think maybe this it sounds slowly, but maybe this is the most quickly way. Yeah, I think that's what I think about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me thank all of you for joining us today, our guest speakers, for your time and for sharing your thoughts, your experience, and the many good examples we heard today of concrete actions and decisions that are helping us to move towards ecological civilization. I want to thank our audience. And I heard here a number of recommendations for us to work more on education, to work more on across borders, across cultures and areas of knowledge, to continue this ongoing dialogue to help us expand our understanding on what ecological civilization really means and how can we move that into action. And I do think that the Earth Charter, with this systemic, holistic approach on respect for the community of life, respect and care for the community of life, the whole notion of ecological integrity that is already articulated there, and the whole connection with the social and economic justice and non-violence, democracy, non-violence, and peace. The Earth Charter already offers and articulates this systemic and holistic approach that could help us in that process of expanding our consciousness, of educating ourselves of how we can move towards ecological civilization. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you especially all the organizations that joined effort in organizing this series of 4 webinars, and happy and good end of the year to everybody. I hope we can collaborate more in the future. Thank you.